A lot of the times we stop ourselves because of the stories that we are making up that are not even true, not even valid. We don't even know that they will be a problem. And we just anticipate all of these bad things that could happen. But it's just, again, like I said, that metaphor of just walking around with an umbrella saying, well, yeah, someday it may rain, but it's not raining today.
This is the Entrepology Podcast. The podcast where we optimize the bodies, brains, and lifestyles of entrepreneurs, go-getters, and world-changing innovators.
Welcome to the Entrepology Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Walker. As a naturopathic doctor and anthropologist, I optimize the health and performance of badass women working to change the world as entrepreneurs and go-getters. You know, people exactly like you. Your business, body balance, and inner badass. These are the themes we are exploring. So it's my pleasure today to introduce you to a fellow naturopathic doctor and business coach, Dr. Andrea Maxim. And Andrea works in a similar space to myself, but she does really incredible work in this world, and she does it in her own unique way. Andrea is a practicing naturopathic doctor, author, and business mentor, and she helps outstanding health practitioners who are financially struggling in running their own practice. She believes running the business side of your clinic should be as exciting and as rewarding as helping your patients. And on that, I totally agree. Andrea and I had an amazing conversation, really breaking down where we are at the end of 2020, moving into 2021, and what we need to be aware of as female entrepreneurs. We talked inconvenient truths, marketing tactics, and universal strategies that we all need to be looking at as we move into 2021. Andrea is someone who has consistently invested in herself, and her experience and her capacity to articulate her ideas clearly reflects that. It is really my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Andrea Maxim. Dr. Andrea Maxim, welcome back to the Entrepology Podcast.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. This is such a treat for me, and I'm just thrilled to be here to chat with you and your tribe again.
Well, I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I've got a lot of stuff that I want to unpack with you. And in particular, I really want to talk about what it means to be an entrepreneur in 2020. So you're a practicing clinician, you're seeing patients, you're helping other clinicians build and scale their practices. You've got a lot going on. And what I love about your energy is it's unrelenting. And I feel like that is one of the key pieces that we need to have in 2020. It's been a huge differentiator. The people who are like, no, I'm still in it. I'm still going for it. And those people are like, oh gosh, it's 2020. And that's okay. Whatever response is okay. But I really want to talk about what it means to be an entrepreneur in this year. But before we do that, can you just give everyone from your perspective an overview in terms of the work that you are doing and what really got you to this point in your career?
Sure. So I started out as a naturopathic doctor and very quickly realized that the entrepreneur hat had to be put on just as tightly, if not tighter, as soon as I graduated, and I just hit the ground running. So now I have 2 brick and mortar practices that I've actually just hired employees to basically become me. And I've taken myself out of the one-on-one almost completely. And so now I'm also trying to help other health and wellness practitioners be able to create that 6-figure practice in whatever way that looks. So I am fully on board with either that's an employee, as a business owner, as an independent contractor, but most importantly, to set up your business so that you can shut down the laptop at the end of the day and be present with your family or have that sense of time freedom back. And that's really become kind of the overarching mission in my personal journey as an entrepreneur, but what I know is now and shown to be true for other entrepreneurs as well.
Were you always an entrepreneur?
No, I wasn't. However, when I think about my journey, I am very thankful for Dragon's Den and whatever the other version was, Shark Tank. Because we would watch that as a family. And I think that was my very first exposure to what entrepreneurship was and understanding the language and understanding how they were valuing their businesses. And my mom is very business oriented. She's definitely an entrepreneur in her own right. and the rest of my family all have their MBA. So I was surrounded by business thinkers, and then I just kind of adopted it into my own world.
I love that. Okay, so I alluded to this just before. I was like, "Hey, tell us your story." But what does it actually mean to be an entrepreneur in 2020?
I don't know if being an entrepreneur in 2020 really is any different than any other year. I think we may be telling our story that it's different. I think we may give it a meaning, give it a different interpretation because everybody else is saying that it's different. But for me, it was just a really quick conversation with my team. What is the pivot that we have to make sure that we are still serving our people, make it as quickly as humanly possible, and then just build it or integrate it into our systems and processes. For me, it really wasn't that much of a shift because we executed, implemented, and just made a change very quickly. And I think when other people are putting a meaning to 2020, and I see the memes, I know the stories. I don't know if that's necessarily where you needed to go, was to say, oh, it's just 2020, I'll wait until 2021, or, oh, everybody is struggling, so therefore it gives me a reason to feel that I don't need to show up as much or just ride it out. So in my perspective, it is just like any other year. The only big change is that now we just had a ton of like support from the government, which I took advantage of every chance that I could to keep my employees on payroll, to keep our business running, took advantage of the interest-free loans, which I never needed, but I still took advantage of that. So that would really be the only big difference for our business operation for 2020. Other than that, once we made that quick decision, that quick implementation of new systems, it was like every other day.
Well, it is kind of like every other day with the added energy of the Twilight Zone over top, because there's a different
Sure.
there's a different feel to 2020. But I agree with you on that. I mean, when we look through history and we're like, okay, we look at some of the most, I'm going to say successful, but I mean financially successful entrepreneurs in the last 150 years. When we look at where these blips and clusters of entrepreneurs emerged, they emerged in times of crisis. Mm-hmm. It was those individuals who are like, no, I am not going to zigzag with everyone else. I'm doing the exact opposite motion. I'm taking advantage of this moment. And I think to be able to do that, to be able to go, well, 2020 was like, it's sort of like every other year. There's crises that come and go, requires a certain mindset and a certain level of exposure and training. Where have you invested in the past with respect to mindset and training? Because it's evident at times like this, when everyone else is falling down, you're like, wait, I'm just going to get back up so I have a better view. But that really is from a mindset training perspective.
Yeah, you know what? That's a fabulous point. And I guess when I'm answering these questions, I'm just answering it from my interpretation. So I'm thrilled that you brought it full circle that way. But for me, it really started with, I would say, working with James Wedmore when he just launched BBD. That was my very first exposure to the Wedmore Woo. And then along those lines, really getting into the mentorship with Brandon Lucero. He's still working with a shaman every day, and he brings that into the business. And for me, you can learn about the woo, you can hear about it, you can, learn about manifestation, you can dream about it, you can write in your journal. And I think the biggest outstanding piece for me is I will never learn something without executing on it immediately. So if someone says leap and the net will appear, I will leap and hope that net appears. When someone says you need to get out of your comfort zone in order to grow, I will just follow their direction. I think there's something to be said about wanting to learn and wanting to follow versus being coachable and actually taking that coaching advice and executing on it. And I've always wanted to maintain myself as a coachable, moldable person and just very trusting of the mentors that I surrounded myself with. The biggest source of growth definitely happened with my work with Alex Sharfin over 2019. And he was very much about building the systems, the processes around you so that your business is now more on a solid foundation instead of just putting a bunch of crap together, hoping it sticks with duct tape, and then just hoping and praying for the rest of your business career. Once I put all of those things together, that really helped solidify the continuous ability for me to grow and not falter, or to put myself out there and not like feel that I just got kicked down a couple of pegs. But that still came from that comfort in knowing, well, these people have walked through fire. So now I just get to walk through the warm embers and I'll still be okay. But I have to do the walking to really experience what it is that they're teaching.
Well, and as you said, that coachable piece, like 2 seconds before you said it, I wrote down coachable because it is this key differentiator. And I have walked out of mastermind groups, like left them, been like, not for me, thanks. When the room is filled with, I call them butters, that people are like, oh, that's a good idea, but this, but, and I know there's people listening right now who are even caught in that mindset trap of but. And I feel like one of the strongest differentiators between those who are coachable and those who are wanting more, which is a huge cluster of our population, is the acknowledgement and removal of but from your vocabulary and your way of thinking. This isn't a question. I do this all the time. I love it. I'm rolling off of what you said because the coachability piece is, and I see this in my mastermind groups, who's successful and who's struggling a little bit more. It has to do with that coachability piece. And the other thing I find it has to do with is one's relationship with failure and their worry and their mindset around failure. Can you speak to that a little bit? Like, what is your relationship with failure?
I will say that every time I go into something that's very risky, I really just ask myself this one question, which is, what is the worst case scenario that will happen if I do this? So that could be something as simple as I set up this webinar. I've never done a webinar before. I've promoted it. No one shows up. That is literally the worst case scenario, is that no one shows up. And I've also adopted this mentality around not getting attached to the results, like not getting so addicted to the financial gain or the ROI or whatever, and really just enjoying the journey and enjoying the person I become along that journey. And in those aspects, there is really no failure anymore. It's just sort of like, well, that sucked, but look at all the things that I learned. Or, yeah, that cost me a ton of money, but look at, what we were able to execute during that time, or I was able to find out what I never will do again. Like, all of it is just that experience that I take on. And look, when I say that and it sounds all like hunky-dory and happy, there are moments where I am losing sleep. There are tons of anxiety that comes with making those decisions. But the fact of the matter is I never turn away from the path. I will always say, yep, this is scary AF. Yes, I'm probably going to lose sleep for a couple of months. Yes, I don't know if I can do this, but I'm still going to try and just let the chips fall where they may. And then take everything along that journey as just a part of my knowing, right? Not necessarily my reading about it, thinking about it, learning about it in a course, but now I have the actual knowing, and that actual knowing is going to always allow me to propel forward, as opposed to just wishing, thinking, waiting, or just reading about it.
Yeah, and I want to point out to the people who are hanging out with us, and we've been talking about this a lot over the last few weeks, this notion of confidence versus courage. And I feel like what you just described there is the courage confidence continuum, which is you don't get confidence until you take courageous action. And you just talked about that. You're like, okay, well, listen, like, what's the worst that can happen? I'm going to step into the ring, and in the very least, I'm going to be more familiar with what happens in the Dragon's Den, in the ring, in the real life scenario. And the bonus is that there's these financial rewards and these other elements. And the real bonus and the real outcome there is that, oh yeah, and by the way, you're going to get another notch in that confidence belt, which propels all of these pieces forward. So you described it so perfectly there in this real life context that I wanted to point it out, that it really requires the first step always on these journeys is to be courageous, to be like, okay, I'm going to get in the ring, and the confidence comes out the other side. So talk to me a little bit about your methodology in terms of stepping into this place of courage, because we don't all get there. And what particular with respect to this notion of courage, one of the things I hear from practitioners, and I'm sure you hear it too, is they're like, okay, this is great, but it's my colleagues that I'm scared of. I'm actually not scared of, what patients think of me or what perspective individuals are going to think who I would like to buy my service. I'm actually scared of what my colleagues are going to say. Mm-hmm. How do you address that? Because you, just like me, you're like, I stand up in front of my colleagues every single day. Like, what was that even a thing for you?
Another mantra of mine is what is truth and what is story. And I find, just by what you said, I'm so worried. What if my colleagues say, what if this happens? I'm so afraid that, something X, Y, or Z might happen. And my response to that is, well, did it? Is it happening? Is that a problem that we need to deal with right now? Or are you walking around with an umbrella just waiting for the rain to happen? So it's just getting out of this idea of, well, instead of telling myself stories of what could be or what may happen or what could become a problem, I'm going to step out, see if I can put my umbrella down and oh crap, it's like sunny and shining and everything is great. So, and this goes on into the healthcare industry as coaches, talking with our patients or clients. This goes on to talking with our coaching clients that we have. Like, a lot of the times we stop ourselves because of the stories that we are making up that are not even true, not even valid. We don't even know that they will be a problem. And we just anticipate all of these bad things that could happen. But it's just, again, like I said, that metaphor of just walking around with an umbrella saying, well, yeah, someday it may rain, but it's not raining today. And I think if people could stop with the stories, stop with the over planning, the over prepping, the over preparing, and just do it, that's really been the best way for me to have that courageous action and constantly go forward and just say, well, you know what? If I say something that ruffles people's feathers, if it's a legit response, okay, cool. My bad. So sorry. I will never do that again. But there's also this whole idea of, everyone doesn't revolve around my world as much as we want to think that they do. What I post today will be forgotten about probably by tonight, or if seen at all. So there's that other level of, we may perceive ourselves to be bigger than we are. We may perceive that our reach is much bigger or grander than it is. And in reality, it probably isn't as far, or people just aren't paying attention as much. Because we have to remember that it's like everything is about a scroll world now. You just scroll through things, you see things, you're like, that's cool. You may like it, you may not, and you move on. So I just don't really have any attachment there. And I always just check in, what is the story and what is the actual truth? Like, if I know I'm going to say something that will ruffle feathers and they do, well, I kind of saw that coming. But other than that, I don't know how it's going to land. I don't know if it's going to make a positive impact, if it's going to completely change the trajectory of someone's day in a good way. My most important thing is I just need to show up. And I just need to be there for my tribe. And it's my ego that is always going to stop me from doing that. And we need to start dropping the ego as well, because that's what's keeping you safe and keeping you protected and keeping you staying or playing, perhaps, if I can say this, small, because that is what its job is. But if you can stop listening to that as quickly as humanly possible and then just be like, look, like, this is my calling. I am a helper. I am a healer. I am a mentor. And you don't let people know that you are, then you're not showing up for your tribe. And that is something that I take very seriously.
I agree with you on that piece. I feel like it is just as much, I've been talking to people a lot about this notion of sales, and we can talk about this as well. People are like, oh, sales are so icky and I don't like them, so I don't do them. Like, I just don't. And my perspective on this is that it's actually more of a disservice to make the conscious decision to not share this incredible breadth of knowledge that you have given up your time and your energy and your money to be able to acquire. I feel like it is more of a disservice to the world to just be like, and if you want it, you have to come to me and find me and ask me about it, because it's totally icky for me to share it. And the reality is that mindset just means that all of that knowledge and all of that brilliance might as well be packed away in a book, in a bookshelf, in a speakeasy that no one knows about, because it doesn't get to be it doesn't get to be shared with the world. How do you talk to people and coach people around this idea of sales and the integrity of sales? Because it's so critical to what we do as practitioners, but as service providers. And I think there's a huge opportunity for us to lead and serve, but it's going to require some reconciliation around the sales mindset.
Well, I think now the way people are adopting to messaging and marketing and where people are making these quote unquote sales without selling is, again, showing up and constantly dropping. And this was some like name dropping. This was something that I felt very uncomfortable with for years. And I said, you know what? I have this program. I have this protocol. I have this way that I can serve my audience. I don't need to sell it every single day, but I can at least remind people that it exists. So it's sort of like, you know, if I were to say, yeah, so with one of my Maximized Practitioner students, this is what we were able to do today. And then blah, 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 go on to something that's inspirational or motivational or empowering or whatever. But all I did there was I just gave that little tiny nudge, that little tiny light bulb moment of this is a program that I have. And the more often I say those words, the more people are going to start to connect that with me. So then when you do actually start launching something, it already has that connection piece. So even in practice, we talk about the GAP protocol all the time. I never sell or pitch or force in those trainings, in those live videos, but I'm always saying in the GAP protocol, this is what we do. We just had someone go through the GAP protocol and this was the response that they got. And lo and behold, people start commenting, oh, what's this GAP protocol about? This sounds like something I need. How can I start working with you? So if you don't want to start outwardly or directly selling, then you should at least be every time you post, send an email out, do a video, dropping those case study examples, dropping the terminology that you are using in your brand, dropping the language that is very unique to you or the services that you offer. And that is the missing piece. Is I find a lot of entrepreneurs go up and talk about the same thing that everybody else is talking about. So the message becomes very diluted. But if you can actually say, okay, in my business, I focus on healthy cosmetic facial treatments, or in my business, I focus on coaching on Instagram, or in my business, I focus on X, Y, or Z, then that should be the only things that you talk about. And that's how we get brand recognition. That's how we build the knowing. That's how we build the trust. That's how we build that constant sort of repetition. And another big part on that is that whole idea of repetition that we're like, oh, I just talked about Instagram the other day. I'm not going to talk about it again because people have already heard it. Well, they didn't. And if that is the way your business is set up, then you should be talking about Instagram every single time you go. Or in my industry, we talk about the GAP protocol every single time I go live because that is what we want people to remember us for. And lo and behold, it starts to work. So if it's not about direct selling, it should always be about reminding people about what your offer is. Now, if you are in a live launch, if you are doing something that has a short-term shelf life, yeah, you are going to have to be a little bit more direct, a little bit more quote unquote aggressive. But like you said in the beginning, who am I to not really tell people about how amazing my service is and offer them an opportunity to work with me? It doesn't mean that they have to. You're not like shackling them to your business and forcing them to pay you. But it is your job to make sure that every single person who works with you or could work with you at least has an educated decision. And therefore, when you are selling, you need to be educating them on every single option that they have, their objections, what the outcome is going to look like, what other people have experienced. That is all about the sales mechanism. And again, it's not making you braggadocious or like you're the best or you're the only program that people need to be doing. And a lot of that urgent, yucky sales tactics that people have. But it is your job to show up and it is your job to talk about it.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of those different pieces. And so following off of that notion and really talking about this idea of sales, but planting ideas and sharing ideas, where do you see marketing going in 2021? If you were talking to a cohort of entrepreneurs, and you are, what are the 4 or 5 pieces that you're like, these are things you're going to need to dial in 2021? They can be tactics, they can be strategies. From your perspective, where are we going?
You know what? I don't know what 2021 is going to look like, but I can even say at like right now where people still are not what they're not doing and they need to is it's always going to be about consistency. It really, like, if you want to be successful, if you want to have a breakthrough year in 2021, you just need to find a way to show up. And the more I'm watching the big influencers that are out there, they are showing up every single day, doing a live every single day.
My brain was like every single hour, but yes, every single day.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, you have to do it every day. There's a lot of people that are like maybe once a week if I remember, but even then I don't really want to do it. And the people that are crushing it are the ones that are just there. They are present. They are sharing their world. They are, just showing up for their tribe. They are inspiring them, but they're also giving them action that they can be taking, even if that's just like drop me a DM. And then continuing to build a list, which all of this stuff is things that we hear about all the time, and yet we don't do it, right? But really the big difference that I'm seeing more than anything else is definitely showing up. And then number 2, you just have to get onto the ad bandwagon. If you aren't, and I think this week is a prime example of Facebook like freaking out. We hear about ads being shut down randomly. But the people that have already been showing Facebook, like, I'm willing to play with you, I'm going to work with you, here's the type of material that I want to do, even if it's $2-3 a day, you just need to be putting your stuff out there, boosting it through an engagement campaign for, as I said, a couple dollars a day, allowing that reach to get out there. And if you aren't ready to pay to play, I just don't see your business surviving this social media game. And quite frankly, it is all about social media at this point. Even if you think your website is going to be the selling factor, I can promise you people aren't going to come to your website from a Google search. They're going to find you through social media, then click on all of your stuff and then go check you out in other places. But if you aren't heavily invested in the social media platforms, even if it's just one, I just don't see 2021 going very, very well.
Yeah, but Andrea, I don't like social media.
Okay, so
I wish you could see her face right now, everyone.
So then please don't complain that your business isn't growing, is my response to that.
Oh, look at the truth bomb. I remember when I first started coaching people, I was like, okay, well, let's see if we can find a different strategy, which is exactly what I did when I first started practice. And people are like, well, I'm not taking out dairy or wheat or taking supplements, but you still work your magic. I'd be like, okay, let's see what we can do. And then I reached this point where I was like, listen, then that's cool. You just carry on with whatever it is that you are managing and you take whatever drugs your doctor gave you, because I can't help you if we're not going to do the fundamentals. And it's kind of fundamental in today's day and age that you have a social media presence. And if it is absolutely destroying you from the inside, worst case scenario, you carve out budget and you hire someone else to do it, because you can always invest your time, or you can invest your money, or you can invest both. But this is an area where tactically and strategically, you can't leave it off the table. You can't ignore it.
No. And we're talking daily. We're talking like showing up daily.
Is there any business? I mean, there's some B2B businesses, but like, do you have any examples? Because I know people are like, I know, but I'm an exception. I'm a unique situation. That's what we do, by the way. If you've caught yourself first saying, yeah, but, and now as Andrea continues, you're fighting the yeah, but, because I already told you high performers don't yeah, but, you're fighting it. And now the next stage your brain will try to go to, if you have a history of yeah, butting, is, well, I think I'm probably a unique situation. So do you have any examples in your repertoire of experience, Andrea, that would constitute a unique situation where social media will be unnecessary to someone's growth in 2021 or right now?
No. Nothing is coming to mind. Not for the people that are listening to this podcast. Nothing is coming to mind.
Right. And that, I mean, I was being facetious and asking the question, and I know you know that, and I needed you to answer it, because that's the point. Is I think that one of the things that I have seen 2020 illustrate for people is that for people who've been ignoring some of the fundamentals, or for the people who are like, I just don't want to have to do that, this was a year where you couldn't get away with that anymore. So you really were forced to readdress some of these foundational pieces. And even for practitioners who are listening, this idea, you and I both talked about this at length in the work that we do, you've got to build your list. You've got to be able to think forward in terms of how you are going to diversify your income. 2020 painted that lesson so clearly for so many people. What advice would you give to those people, Andrea, though, who are like, okay, I get it. I've got to do the social media thing. I've never done it before. I'm an older entrepreneur. I got away with a certain strategy for the last 20 years, and that this is all really new for me. So I hear you. I want to make that pivot. Where do I go first?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is we are all helping somebody else do things that they have never done before. And it's so easy for us to help others be like, well, let's just start here, start one day at a time, make those changes. We'll start to add on those changes, blah, blah, blah. And of course, for us, we're the worst, right? We don't give ourselves our own advice. So I'm pretty blunt about this. And again, my tolerance for babying at this point is not nearly as high as it once was, where again, if you're coming from a place of, oh, I want, but I won't do, then I really kind of struggle. So to answer it in a very nice way, if you've never done it before, it's very, very easy. However, again, you have to start dropping the ego, and you have to start worrying about the perfectionism, and you have to start, letting that go a little bit. So let's say for right now, video is king. Video is king across the board. You could easily spend 2 or 3 hours recording a 1-minute snippet on your phone, which, yes, in the beginning, it will feel like that. You're like, crap, all I needed to record was 60 seconds and it took me 3 hours. Yes, it is going to be like that in the beginning, but you did it. And then you can post it. And it's the way that you feel comfortable posting. And then tomorrow, you're going to do that 60-second snippet in maybe 2 hours. Because you've kind of figured it out a little bit more. You kind of got your angles right. You've gone through the work, and then you post that. And then the next day it's going to be maybe an hour and a half. And then the next day it's going to be an hour. It isn't going to be easy. And it is going to take a really long time, because now we're talking about tech, and tech is just like a whole mind blocker in and of itself that we have to get over. So start with where you can edit it, and then start approaching doing things kind of off the cuff, where you're just taking random pictures and posting. And then, of course, as you get a little bit more comfortable with that, you can always start looking into some of the courses that are involved in social media. But let's also talk frankly about how spent we are, because here's the other issue is we already feel overwhelmed. We already feel anxious coming into this conversation, and you're just like, crap, this is one more thing that I have to learn how to do, blah, blah, blah. And this is where, again, as you said, you can either prioritize your time, or you can start making some investments and having people help you. So there are a ton of free resources out there, but it's going to be time and you learning. There are a ton of paid resources out there, which will get you there much faster. So you just kind of have to pick that path. But before even making any sort of significant financial investment, just get comfortable with doing it on your own and let the chips fall where they may. Look, there are people that are now running 7-figure businesses because they just did vlogs on YouTube talking about what they were eating that day, or this is what I'm baking today, or look at my bookshelf. It's not profound information that people are looking for from you. They're not looking for you to be the next Simon Sinek or Tony Robbins. That expectation is not there. What they are expecting you to do is to be authentic, to show up, give them a bit of insight into what your world looks like, and kind of work your magic from there. And again, remember, asterisks there, add in your branded language, add in your protocols, add in what you do. And again, it's a game. It is a total game. You have to invest in it. You have to be mentally prepared for it. But like James Wedmore says, it is a binary action. There is no gray when it comes to showing up for your business. You either do or you don't. And you just kind of have to figure out, a way for you to get your feet wet in the beginning. And then eventually you'll be like jumping in the puddles and you're going to be having so much fun with it. But you do need to start. And just like every diet, it starts with that next meal, that next day, that week, that month, and it just kind of compiles that way.
For the practitioners in the crowd, I feel like this has been this tremendously analogous time period, because it really gets easy for us to be like, oh, just take out gluten or take out dairy or like take these 85 pills or whatever it is that we're asking people to do. And then we look at their faces where they're like, oh my gosh, like I don't know if I can drink a glass of water every day. Right. This is the exact same thing, but in reverse. And I love that you shared that quote from James Wedmore, that there's really no gray when it comes to showing up for your business. Because I think as healthcare practitioners, we'd all would say the same about your health, that, you can't have a vitamin once a week, or you can't eat an apple, every other Friday and then expect that you're going to be able to achieve great health. Like you have to be in or you have to be out. Talk to us before we make a transition in the nature of the interview. There's one last piece I really want to tackle, and this is this notion of investing in yourself during uncertain times. And it's a conversation I've had a lot with people where they're like, oh, I'd love to invest in myself, but I don't know what's around the corner. And again, I know we've got practitioners here, but I know we've got entrepreneurs of all stripes. And I feel as though when we invest in ourselves, it does this energetic thing where people are willing to invest in us. But talk about this idea of investing in particular around at uncertain times.
I think it just comes back to what I had mentioned before about, yes, we are in uncertain times, and no, we don't know what's around the corner, but it doesn't necessarily mean that what's around the corner is negative. So I'm still living in truth, what I know to be true today, and not anticipating what bricks may fall apart in my wall tomorrow. And again, that just goes with those decisions. Okay, if I start investing in myself, like if we're talking self-care, I start working with a personal trainer, for instance, if that's one of the self-care pieces. Okay, yeah, you are investing in a contract. Look, like if their business shuts down, if things are going to collapse, we're still dealing with humans here, right? They're not going to be like, oh, well, you signed up to this yesterday and the world collapsed tomorrow, like you're locked in. So I think we also over anticipate what the damage could be, how hard it's going to be to get out of these things. But even if we're talking about investing in self-care as in a time thing, so you are investing now an hour of silence every single day, like that it has an instant ROI and requires no financial requirement. If you are talking about investing in mindset coaching or personal coaching for yourself, yes, that is an investment. But thank goodness for the internet, typically all those things are virtual anyway. So you're good. But if we're talking again about the financial worry, well, most people will always find a way to find money when they need to. Like if you had an emergency happen in your world, let's say to one of your children, and it was going to be $3,000, you can find a way, and you will find a way to find that $3,000 if you know it's going to make sure that your family is safe. And that's kind of a weird example, but it is still very true to any decision that we make for ourselves. If this is something that you know is going to help you grow personally, professionally, business-wise, whatever, and you will find a way. You will find a way to make that work, even in uncertain times. And there was another thought that just popped into my head that I completely lost. So hopefully that will come back to me. But really, that's just kind of it. Like there's also this conception that it has to be the most expensive investment too. And I don't think that that's necessarily true, especially with people giving away so much free content now and so much free advice, that there are ways of doing it on a shoestring where you still feel that you are serving yourself and your movement towards X, Y, or Z. And then don't forget the possibility of doing exchanges. Like a lot of people are still in the barter system where, will you give me an hour of your coaching time and I will give you X, Y, or Z. There's just so many different ways of having this get done. But it is going to be a necessary piece of everything, because just like my last podcast with Alex Sharf, and he said, the most important person in your business is you. You are the most important person. If you were to ask the room, who's the most important person in my business, you'd say clients, customers, my reception, my staff, my employees. But what it really comes down to is you are the keystone piece that business resides on. So if you aren't investing in self-care to whatever capacity that looks like, then when uncertain times do happen and it's for the negative and you aren't mentally strong, you aren't physically strong to handle that, then everything else around you is going to fall apart. And that isn't something that you can recover from if you physically fall apart.
I love it. I think it's totally sage advice. And it's funny because I made the decision probably 2 months ago, and I was like, I have no idea what the next year is going to look like, but I've doubled down this year. We're going to double down and be strategic next year. And then simultaneous to that, I invested in Pilates. I invested in weekly massages. I invested in these pieces for myself that I know are going to improve and accelerate my stamina, because if I fall down during this period, it all falls apart.
Yes.
In my family, in my business, actually in all of the areas that are important in my life. And what I don't have time to invest anymore is time. Mm-hmm. But I am able to reinvest financially in myself to ensure that I have built-in methodologies for sustainability. So I love what you just said there, and I only share this because I think it's also important to walk the talk as leaders and share these pieces. And so it's not coming from a place of, oh, look what I can do. It's coming from a place of, look what I'm doing, because this is how you make it sustainable for yourself. So I love that, Andrea. I think it's amazing. What I want to do now is I want to transition the interview. I'm going to throw what we call our KPIs at you. So just like we have these in our businesses, I believe we have them in how we live our lives as well. So I've got some rapid fire questions for you. And the first one is this. What is the most impactful book you've read during the pandemic?
It's by James Clear. It's called Atomic Habits. I loved it.
Awesome. What is the one thing, speaking of habits, that you are most consistent with respect to your health?
Going to bed early and going to the gym 3 times per week. If I do more, awesome, but definitely 3 times per week, because I hired a personal trainer who forces me to go to the gym twice for sure. So that was an inherent thing that I had to become consistent with.
What is something totally badass about you that people would not otherwise know?
I am, because of the gym, I think I'm a really great boxer. For like an amateur, yes, I love kickboxing, and it just like puts me into my wheelhouse. And I think, I haven't yet done it, but I think I could fight people enough to like run away fast enough as well. But I think I could throw a good cross, and I was not equipped to do that a couple years ago.
That's pretty awesome. I did Kung Fu for the last 2 years, and I have to say, I am not equipped to fight people.
Fight people enough to like shock them that I actually can throw a punch and then run away very, very quickly.
I think I would need you by my side.
Okay.
It's just not a natural movement for me. I need a slingshot or something. What do you do for fun or play?
I drink White Claw and watch RuPaul's Drag Race.
I love that. You're like, I was ready for that answer, and I'm going for it. And finally, entrepreneurism. Are we born this way, or do we learn to become entrepreneurs?
Learn.
Love it. Mm-hmm. Andrea Maxim, such a pleasure as always. Where can we send people to learn a little bit more about all the work you're up to in this world? So Instagram at Andrea Maxim ND is probably the fastest, best place to find me. And then if you want to check out maximizebusiness.ca, that is my website where I host my business coaching and consulting and mentorship. I love it. We'll hook everyone up in the show notes. Andrea, thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thank you.
If there's one thing I took away from this interview, like so many other interviews and interactions that I'm feeling right now, It's that as an entrepreneur, as we move into the end of 2020 and into 2021, we need to embrace a sense of courage. We need to lean into the fact that the world has changed and that now more than ever, our way of thinking and the gifts that we have, the training that we have, the capacity for impact that sits inside of us, we need to give it a platform and a voice. We need to share with individuals how we can help change their lives, how we can help change the landscape so we can move into an era of creation. I really feel like this is the time for entrepreneurs, and that the single most differentiating factor for those who are going to make it through the next 24 months and those who are going to choose a different path is simply going to come down to making courageous choices and courageous actions every day. The strategies and the tactics can be learned, they can be outsourced, they can be acquired. But the notion of courage that sits inside of all of us, this is the thing that we need to tap into to move forward and to contribute in an exponential way. I love to hang out with people who want to be courageous. I love to hang out with people who are looking to have bigger impact in the world. And we do that, as always, over in our Entrepology Collective on Facebook. If you want a wolf pack of women who will be there to support you on your courageous journey, you can find us hanging out over in our free Facebook group, the Entrepology Collective. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to be interviewing thought leaders related to entrepreneurship and our businesses. We are going to set ourselves up as we move into a new year in a new way. So watch for me next week in your inbox or wherever you happen to capture your podcast. I'm Dr. Megan Walker, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again next Tuesday.